Bueno, continuamos con el panel titulado Music Strategies in a Connected World, Innovation and Marketing in Global Markets. Kelly Fox and Henry England, moderado por Jorge Bedoya.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a este panel que se llama Music Strategies in a Connected World, Innovation and Marketing in Global Markets. Como ya lo han repetido varias veces, este es un panel que es en inglés. Cualquier cosa, allá afuera están las ayudas para la traducción. Nada más dos cositas, obviamente, ya antes de empezar el panel, es que porfa no vayan a contestar el celular si están en las filas de enfrente. Es lo único. Yo tengo la concentración de un Golden Retriever cachorro y sí que pierdo el hilo de la conversación, así que porfa es lo único que les voy a pedir. Y nada, entonces gracias por estar aquí y vamos a comenzar. That was going to become into a big thing or the next new big artist or something, right?
Yes and no, because I do think that if you utilize it in the right way, it can be used really, really well with your album campaigns. We're not necessarily going and trying to find new producers or new artists on TikTok to sign anymore, but what we are seeing is exposure to new people that we might not have discovered beforehand. But that doesn't necessarily mean just because we think they're great, we're going to go, okay, let's sign them right away. It's going to be, let's see how this develops. Maybe we'll put them in sessions with songwriters and producers, and then we'll go from there. But I don't really think that on a larger scale it's impacted what we do, but on the major labels.
Yeah, just to come in there. Yeah, I think from a label perspective, you know, you talk about kind of discovering newer artists, George, that, TikTok and that is obviously a new form of being able to, discover new talent, whereas before, using DSPs, YouTube, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, whatever else it was, Facebook, whatever. But, this is, A&Rs are definitely using TikTok as a form of, new discovery for new, artists, songs, whatever else. But it's definitely changed there, definitely there, more like scouting perspective. And that also brings in kind of data within that, whether songs are trending on TikTok. And, obviously that's going to pull quite a lot of attention to those certain acts and those certain songs. So, yeah, it's definitely changed, in terms of a scouting perspective.
Okay, so, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no,
I
have another point to add on to that. But we've seen some labels do really well with signing TikTok songs. So they'll sign a singles deal versus signing the artist, which I think over the course of 2020 to 2023, we saw labels put a lot of money behind discovery TikTok artists, when in reality they couldn't convert, like we were saying. But at the same time, what we can use TikTok for on the A&R side is to help maybe elevate an artist who's already out there. So for example, like Charlie XCX has had the biggest summer. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that she used TikTok in a really authentic way to help boost her campaign. So it wasn't just based off of her, people discovering Charlie from that way. She's been around for ages. But what she did do is utilize it with, the Apple dance. She utilized it with connecting with fans on that level. So I do think it's a powerful tool, but it's not a powerful tool for A&Rs to sign artists on a larger scale in that way.
On that note, when it comes to established artists, do you see it as a positive tool, or do you think they just see it as a cool new app and they're secretly missing the 90s?
Yeah, well, Kelly touched on a good example there. Obviously, Charlie XCX and her Brat Summer. That kind of took her record and her exposure to kind of newer heights, really. And I think, if she kind of didn't have TikTok and, the exposure that platform gave her album rollout, her brand, her artist profile, it probably would look a bit different. But, so it can be a hugely positive tool. From a, which I'm sure you're about to get to, from a developing artist perspective, it can really change someone's, career overnight.
Also, I think with a lot of established artists, what we did see was songs start to take flight from 10 years ago on. So you saw bands like Mother have a really, really huge moment on TikTok. And what it did help was it helped their streaming numbers. But a lot of people when they would maybe go to a show, would just know that one song. Or, for example, someone like Steve Lacy. People knew Bad Habit, but they knew the 30-second verse of it, and you saw it play out in his concerts, where they would go, and every phone would go up just for that one song. So, yes, it can be a great tool for exposing people to even established artists, but what I think the hard part is that they attach themselves to a song and not to the artist themselves. So it's harder to build a community in that way.
No, I think that's actually really interesting because I just remember when the last season from Stranger Things came out, there was this song.
Kate Bush song.
Yeah, exactly. And it got so popular that they were saying that she couldn't believe when she saw like the numbers on her streaming, all her streaming numbers, because they were up the roof.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kelly touched on it before. It's like, yeah, giving older songs a kind of new life, right? A similar example, George, is with Saltburn and what's her name? Saltburn song.
Oh, Sophia Ellis-Bextor.
Sophia Ellis-Bextor. Was that Dancing? No, wrong song.
I don't remember.
But same kind of process there. It's a song that's been out for a long time. It's been synced in a movie, a program. TikTok has kind of picked up on that, traction and that popularity, and then, next thing you know, those songs are back in the chart. So yeah, it can have massive effects for older songs.
Okay, cool. I kind of messed it up with my slides here, and I just figured out that I kind of skipped one. But I was going to ask you something about, the cultural differences. You both come from, despite living in the UK, Kelly, you're American.
Yes.
Your career started in the US, and of course, Harry, your career has always been in the UK.
English.
Exactly. So I was going to ask you, do you think that cultural values play a role when it comes to music in the UK and in the US?
100%. I think the way that we consume music as different cultures is huge. I think being somebody from America living in the UK, I was exposed to an entirely different sort of electronic scene that I would have just not been exposed to had it not been for me living in the UK, because there's just a culture, there's a rave culture there. There's a much bigger festival culture and much smaller festival culture as well. So, we don't just have the Coachellas in England. You go to Coachella because it's a scene, it's a party, it's an atmosphere. But when you go to a rave or you go to a festival in England, you're going for the music, you're going for your friends, you're going for the entire experience, of course, but it's mainly because you find a great DJ that you want to go see. And, you're exposed to a ton of other new underground DJs as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think from a more kind of overall perspective as well, each music market has their own kind of unique set of characteristics, whether that's defined by cultural backgrounds, language,
Slang,
kind of popular local genres of music, obvious examples being, Latin music, Latin America, the prevalence of rap music in America. And then I think from a UK perspective, we've always kind of lent towards more kind of indie rock, acts. And I think, so they massively, cultural values play a massive part in that. And I think, there's a reason as why pop music is, popular music, and that's because, it's quite culturally accessible as a genre of music. People can understand it. It's mainly sung in English, which is, spoken by a lot of countries in the world. It kind of has a simple composition to it, has a chorus that repeats, people can sing along. And also, it's usually about something mundane and relatable, like heartbreak or something, or love, or, whatever else. So I think, cultural values play a massive point in, in music and popularity of it as well.
I think there's also a good point to touch on with radio and how songs spread in the US versus maybe the UK. So, the way that we see radio in the UK, it's pretty much publicly funded by the BBC. So, you can find a radio plugger, and it's a lot less expensive to send your song to radio than it is in the US. So sending your song to radio in the US could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a lot of privately owned companies, but you make a lot more money. So whether you're a songwriter, an artist, if you get a top 40 slot, you're looking at a good paycheck. And I think there is a big difference of the way that people write in LA versus the UK versus Sweden versus Latin America. You are writing for the audience it's a business at the end of the day. Yes, it's art, but it's art meets business. And so the way that people compose might be a little bit different.
And perceive your songs as well. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like 30% art, right? And 70% business.
Yeah, yeah. I think most artists nowadays, they can't just be artists anymore. You can't just say, oh, I'm just in it for the art. Some of the best artists that you know that are the most popular right now have been grinding. It's because they understand the business side of it. They understand what it takes to become a superstar nowadays. And that's the whole, overnight success is 10 years in the making. That's the Chappell Roans of the world, the Charlies of the world, the Sabrina Carpenters of the world. And you're seeing that impact on a global level right now.
So having said that, do you feel somehow that perhaps the UK is a little bit more receptive when it comes to new music? Or is it the other way around, perhaps? Is it the US a little bit more receptive when it comes to?
Good question.
That is a good question. I think it depends on the genre, to be honest. I think that the US has always been really accepting, and actually they long for music from the UK. You see it with the British invasion back in the 50s, Beatles and all of that. You see it with all of the bands coming over. You saw it in the 2000s with like the Arctic Monkeys. And, I think the US thinks that the UK is very cool. So
Which
they're
it is.
really, it is. But they're really accepting in that way because the UK does have a huge cultural significance in music, and they always have.
Yeah, I think the UK is probably quite receptive to new music. You could also say kind of newer forms of music, more alternative music. We've all, as a kind of nation, we've always had kind of more alternative leaning, forms of music. If you compare it to somewhere like America. So I think maybe it is a bit more, maybe the UK audience is a bit more receptive with regards to like pushing boundaries of, I don't know, newer forms and, fresher ideas. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think not to go too deep with it as well, but I also think that, America is run on capitalism. Like I said, it's a music business. People want to make money. In the UK, there's still a level of respect for the art that people are doing.
Yeah.
And it's because it's publicly funded radio, because it's not just, in it for the money kind of thing. Because it's expensive to be an artist.
100%. So in that sense, it definitely is, UK is definitely more receptive. I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
You know that most of the people have a massive respect for talent that comes out of the UK. However, do you think that every single type of music that you guys produce over there perhaps has been able to translate properly in other jurisdictions? No?
No.
That was really quick.
No, because I also just think that there are certain things that just don't cross over. Take, for example, grime and drill. It hasn't broken America. It hasn't broken, I mean, maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but in the Latin American space, in big ways.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, rap's a really good example because as a form of music, rap music is quite kind of localized. You talk about New York rap, you talk about Atlanta rap, Florida rap, London rap with grime and drill. And, the rappers, from various of those different areas, they speak with certain slang, they speak with a certain accent. Skepta is saying, or Central C is saying things in one way that maybe an American audience, won't relate to and won't find familiar. So, yeah, I mean, grime and drill are a good example there because, it's also usually about experiences, within the local area. So grime and drill that's quite a London-centric, form of music, right? And as I said, they speak in a certain way, the phonetics, the slang. I think there's probably only two UK rap tunes that have broken America, and one is Don't Rush by Heady One and Young T and Bugsy, and the other one is Sprinter by Central C and Dave.
Yep.
And I think the reason why is because they're just undoubtedly good and catchy songs, and that's it.
That
I would
actually,
agree.
it's very curious because, for example, it wasn't the same thing with reggaeton, with reggaeton here, because it actually broke into the U.S. and I don't exactly believe that it was because of the Latino population in the U.S. I mean, yes, it had something to do, but it catches my eye the fact that something that is in English, a language that they speak in the States, of course, hasn't been able to maybe generate a huge impact just yet. Maybe, perhaps, it is a marketing problem, because, I mean, we get bombarded with a bunch of stuff where we see hip-hop and rap artists. It doesn't matter if it's a video game experience or just some trend on social media, or even before, we'll just see rap artists in movies, for example, The Fast and the Furious or something, so we will become familiarized very quickly,
Well, media is a really good way to familiarize yourself with an artist. I think, going back to like the TikTok thing, TikTok has a global reach, of course, but you mentioned Stranger Things and the Kate Bush sync in there. That is something that is watched globally, and it was a huge worldwide phenomenon. So there is something to be said about how important sync is as well for spreading songs across the world.
Yeah, huge, massive.
And sometimes it's not just a language barrier. Sometimes it can be that, for example, I always use this one, but like DNC had a song called Cake by the Ocean. No one really knows what that meant, but what they loved was the feeling they got from the song. It was fun, it was upbeat, it was catchy, and people just had a good time listening to it. So it didn't have to have this like deep, powerful meaning. And I think music in many ways can serve purposes that don't have to fulfill the whole pie. I can listen to Adele, but I can also listen to Heady One and have different experiences, but they still fulfill me in a music way.
Just imagine you listening to Heady One.
This actually takes me to the next my next question, which is platforms and this whole echo chamber effect that they have. Do you think that people, due to platforms under algorithm, are having less access to more diverse music because the algorithm keeps feeding them similar music?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. There's a massive echo chamber effect, with regards to Spotify's and Spotify especially. Actually, I think, obviously, you have your playlist and the playlist ends and it kind of goes onto that Spotify radio mode, and I think a lot of the music that you're fed is a range of kind of limited suggestions, and also usually includes songs that you've listened to before. So in that sense, in turn, that kind of stops you from discovering, newer music, and also it kind of disregards. It more includes kind of popular and kind of bigger artists and disregards more kind of underrated niche, forms of music. So again, that kind of like further, doesn't help kind of diversify your listening. And then, with stuff like generated playlists, yeah, it's usually, filled with things that you have already listened to before. So it's kind of only really kind of confirming your like
listener bias almost in that way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that there's also something to be said about the fact that a lot of Spotify playlists nowadays are not run by people, but by AI. AI is an amazingly powerful tool. I don't want to talk badly about it. I think it could be used in great ways. I also think, like any powerful tool, it can be used in not so great ways as well. So I do think the human aspect behind the Spotify playlist, the curation of these things, has kind of been taken away, where you used to have, the rock editor of a playlist, and they might introduce you to a new band that might be heavier rock, but they'll also put in something that's more indie rock because they're human with different tastes, whereas the algorithm, you might like listening to heavy rock and it just shows you that from now on.
Yeah, it doesn't push your boundaries as like a consumer of music, which is sad really, because that's kind of like, that's, listening to music growing up, there's that kind of like pure essence of like discovering new music, like as a kid, as you're growing up, becoming interested in different artists, different genres, growing up. And I think that's Spotify is kind of encouraging this kind of lazy consumer kind of pattern of listening to music that is really like aiding discovery, which is
I agree with
a
that.
shame.
I think we're complex listeners. We don't just listen to one thing, and we shouldn't just be fed one thing. And it's also fun to discover music. Like, when you get to be that person who's like, oh, I showed you this new band or this new artist, you feel a sense of ownership. And I think the sense of ownership with these artists has kind of gone out the window, and that's really how you build a community. When you're an artist trying to build your fan base, is you want them to have a sense of ownership. You want them to be the person who, you know, I showed you Chapel Roan before Chapel Roan was Chapel Roan.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Well, that's what A&R is built on, right? As well, you know, and yeah.
Is the ear.
There's nothing like listening to that new artist that you just discovered. It's like, what is this? And you kind of get a little bit of FOMO because you were like, wait, what? This came out 2 years ago? Where was I? You know, like you even feel bad for discovering it that late. You know, but at the same time, this kind of leaves me at Bill's sort of a dilemma because we're facing, you know, we're facing playlists perhaps that have been built by AI, you know, taking into account or considering the tastes, the musical taste of the person, you know, whose account, you know, they're managing. But at the same time, before we also had maybe people curating playlists that perhaps, I don't know, might be influenced by payola a little bit.
Exactly. So there's always, with every positive comes a negative, though. No matter what, like AI, there's always going to be positives and negatives in it. With every radio DJ, going back to the 60s, I mean, payola was outlawed, I think, in like 1973. It kind of came back in the early 2000s, and it was pretty sticky because it went from, you know, here's a big check to, oh, a TV just showed up at the radio station for the DJ, and oh, it's from the Backstreet Boys manager. Oh, it's so crazy how that worked out. But, you know, I kind of think it's similar in a lot of ways to how society works too. Look at politics.
Now, moving towards something that you brought before, which was once again TikTok. Do you think we're currently suffering, you know, this epidemic called the one curse wonder phenomenon?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we obviously touched on it earlier, but, you know, TikTok can have, you know, some incredible, you know, effects for, you know, an up-and-coming artist. You know, their career can literally change overnight. You know, a song can go viral. They can get, you know, millions and millions and more streams, millions and millions and more followers. You know, the streams are constantly going up, and, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you're hot, right? But I think, you know, like what music is based on, in my opinion, and a lot of, you know, doing music and being successful in music is about being able to deal with like the momentum, because you're only really going to kind of get one chance as an artist, and when that chance comes, you've got to really take it. So if you're a developing artist that has had like an overnight sensation with a song, well, have you got more songs ready that are as good as that song that's gone viral? Are you selling tickets? Are you doing, you tour in the country? Have you got people buying your tickets and buying your merch? You know, have you even ever performed live? You know, I remember, you know, Pink Panthers is a great example, right? You know, she was a huge phenomenon, you know, out of lockdown, and she kind of encapsulates this kind of Gen Z, you know, lockdown artist, whereby, you know, she had this crazy, you know, amount of success in such a short amount of time. And I went, and to be fair, she had done live shows, but I went to one of her kind of first proper headline shows, and, you know, I remember thinking that she wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And like, you know, she's a different kind of artist. You know, a lot of her consumers of music are, you know, young, they're online, but, you know, she didn't have much stage presence, and, you know, but that's kind of more of a specific example. But, you know, if you are going to blow up overnight, you know, you need to be prepared for it, and you need to be able to capitalize on that moment, is my point, really.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of caused this effect in the major labels where they will sign a moment versus signing an artist. And, you know, someone, to Harry's point, having to be prepared for it, not only on the business side, but mentally, it is wild. Like, I don't think people understand how wild it is to go from playing something in your bedroom, thinking 100 people are going to see it, to 30 million views on a video, and every major label hounding in like hawks to try and sign you and going, here's $5 million. And you've probably not had more than $2,000 in your bank account at one time if you're a struggling artist. And you're like, oh my God, all of this it's a lot to take in. And I think the mental health effects on that can also be incredibly detrimental because it doesn't allow a sense of creativity to have the songs ready to go, to have things that fans can then go discover and consume. And it makes me really sad for those artists because we've seen it. We've seen it even in the last 4 years. There was an artist called Katie Gregson McLeod who had this incredible verse from a song called Complex. And, you know, every big artist was hitting her up. Oh my God, you're amazing. This is so good. It's poetry, blah, blah, blah. Every major label also hit her up. They signed her for $5 million and they dropped her less than a year later because she just didn't have the follow-up.
She wasn't ready. The songs weren't ready. They also took too long to that. You know, you have to have this kind of constant, you know, stream of releases. You need to be able to like feed your consumers, right? You need to feed your audiences, your fans, and yeah, you know, she's probably one of, you know, quite a few examples of where Kelly and I have experienced, you know, having meetings with labels, having meetings with A&Rs, and you know, obviously initially hearing about, you know, them signing this, you know, massive deal for this new exciting artist, and yeah, within a year, you know, they're not on the label anymore. So
wait, you know, as a manager, and also as an A&R, do you think there's a way to safely transition into a more sustainable career, meaning from the one chorus wonder, you know, into a more not established artist, but a sustainable act,
you need to have all your ducks in a row, don't you?
Yes.
You need to be doing, you know, the live shows. You need to be kind of, you know, working your ass off, going up and down, you know, the country doing shows, you know, trying to engage that you know, those audiences. You know, obviously the TikTok needs to be good, but you know, you also need to have a good team around you. You know, you need to have good management, you know, and you need to have a good label, you know, A&Rs. You know, that's something that is so important. You know, it's like, I can't tell you how hard it is to be successful as an artist. You need like every star to align, you know, whether that be from your talent to like your representation to like, you know.
I think it's also about knowing yourself as an artist, and somebody who, you know, for the example that we used, they don't know what the next 5 years are going to look like because one video blew up. To Harry's point, having an amazing team around you who's not going to take advantage of you. You're not going to sign a shitty deal. Sorry.
No, you can't.
Okay.
Don't worry.
You don't want to sign a shitty deal because you have a team who just wants the quick check from the label, and they're going to say, yeah, sign that $5 million, because they're going to take that 15% commission off the top. Yeah. But I think the reason that I keep harping on the artists who we're talking about, you know, who are 6, 7 albums in, they have gotten to know themselves and what is authentic to them, what they want to say, what their story is, what their brand is, all of these things that takes time to build. And you can't do that.
You can't rush that. Well, people are humans as well, right? You know, as much as you're finding out who you are as an artist, you're finding out who you are as a human being as well. And as Kelly said, you know, you can't rush that, right? You learn things every day. You learn new things over the course of your life, and it's the same thing as an artist. Yeah, right?
And that gives you stuff to write about. And I don't know, I think you have to allow artists to evolve as well. I do think, going back to your question, what do we do to maybe prevent something like this? So say it is a smaller artist, I wouldn't necessarily go, yeah, sign a major label deal. I would say, go with the person who you made that song with. So say it's like your bud who's a producer who lives down the street. Go make 5 more songs and put them out. And guess what? If they're not like phenomenal, great, you're building your catalog. You're still building your catalog. You're still building up what you want to say. And you know what? Later on, if you do become Chapel Roan 10 years later, you can take down those songs. They don't have to live there. It doesn't have to be your legacy, the first footsteps that you did. God forbid, the stuff that we did starting off in our careers, if that was just our legacy for the rest of our careers, I don't think I'd have a career anymore.
Yeah. No, it kind of feels that certain artists have given up the whole concept of building an album, building a catalog, building maybe a career, and they're trying to play, the lottery with the viral moment kind of.
Yes, that's what it is. It's a lottery. And you're just hoping to strike lightning twice, 3 times, 4 times. And, we spoke about this yesterday. We were all kind of joking about it on the way here, where when artists try and use these techniques of like, oh, I need to go viral or else my manager won't release the song. Like, oh, we're so tired of that. Like, it's I don't know. Or, oh, I'm going to leak it because my label doesn't want me to. It's like, you don't have to play into the false narrative. Just be authentic, and that's what builds your brand.
Yeah, I think going back to your point of this kind of concept of death of the album, which is a bit of a shame, really. I mean, I massively enjoy listening to an album top to bottom, and I think this kind of wave of, short form media, fast flowing, media with regards to TikTok. I think a lot of younger generations, they have a shorter attention span. So yeah. I think that kind of concept of death of the album, that's probably something that can be applied to maybe artists that have, a newer and a younger audience, because that might not be the most kind of profitable way to package your music, like as a product. Like, is your average music listener going to listen to 12 tracks from top to bottom, who's from that generation, who's kind of looking for that next thing constantly and has a short attention span? I'm not sure. So
yeah, I guess there's also, off of that too, the same way we have to let artists evolve, we have to let the music industry evolve as well. We can't, it's blending the traditional marketing methods with the new age ones, blending the way that we did things, and not, we don't want to fall into the age of when Napster came out and people said, oh, we have to get rid of this. It's like, well, embrace what's new and find how it works within your system. Don't just shoo it away because you're scared of it as well. So I think, yes, it might be the death of an album, but it could be that new artists love an EP.
I was going to say, yeah, the birth of an EP.
Exactly.
The rebirth.
The rebirth of the EP.
Or rebirth of the mixtape.
Exactly. And you know what? What we've noticed in music over the years, at least in the time that I've been working in music, is how quickly concepts recycle themselves and people think that it's new. Whether it's the way that they do branding, whether it's the way that, people are consuming music. Like, I saw that Walkmans were being sold again, and now they're being sold as a nostalgic factor.
Yeah, on top of that, you look at physical product and the resurgence of vinyl within the last, 10 to 15 years, in more kind of popular forms of music. Yeah, things definitely do come back in cycle, just like fashion does,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so speaking of evolution and things that are new and things that come back, do you think that after the pandemic, perhaps music preferences have shifted a little bit? Do you find people maybe looking for more upbeat kind of music that speak about positive things? Or do you think that we are about to leave a second phase of the emo music?
This is one of my favorites.
Go on, Kelly, I'll let you start.
It's something we talk about all the time, but I think that music very heavily reflects on the economy. I think post-pandemic, it's not just because it was a pandemic, but I do think that there is a huge effect on when the economy is really good, people want sad music. We've just seen it in trend cycles. And when the economy is really bad, we go into this sort of like recession era pop music. So you have everything from, Kesha, Jason Derulo, Flo Rida, when the 2008 housing crisis came along, because all people wanted to do was like, fuck it, I'm so broke, I just want to go to the club and party to Kesha. At least that's when I was in LA.
Yeah, and you can see that, with again, this is the third time we're using this example, but the Charlie XCX album, you know, as a form of pop music, that's probably quite pushing the boundaries with regards to like what's acceptable to say in the public eye. You know, there's like, you know, consistent use of like drug use throughout her like whole, you know, album. And I think, you know, and I think that kind of rebellious nature to that album, I think it does reflect, you know, the world that we're living in at the moment. I think, you know, especially from a UK perspective, you know, politics is in the shit. And,
Same with the US.
you know, you look at, you know, some of the awful things that are happening, you know, globally, you know, and I think going back to your point of escapism, I don't think it's a sense of, well, there's kind of two sides of it. Definitely people want feel-good music or sad music when their kind of surroundings are kind of encouraging them to feel that way. But also I think it's more just to do with the fact of just escapism and like building a world. I think that's what's so important for an artist these days, is just like building like world building and building something that you can kind of believe and like and kind of live
And
in.
lose yourself in too.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty nice theory, you know. Now I'm wondering whether or not, you know, the economy was pretty good in the UK while Morrissey and the Smiths came out, you know. That makes me think that, you know, perhaps you guys were doing pretty well.
Well, it could be economy, it could be political climate, it could be a number of things. Because I think you saw it in politics with loads of the punk movement and all of that. It was a very like fuck the man movement, and so I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I do think that at least over the last 15 to 20 years, we've seen a huge reflection of it being the economy versus what's being put out.
Do you think this escapism that you were mentioning opens the door for new acts, perhaps?
I think it just has to be authentic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It always kind of goes back to that level of authenticity as an artist. Yeah, it definitely can be a way in for newer artists, but you know,
I don't think it's the only way, but I do think it's an avenue.
So this leads me to the last point on the slide.
that went quick.
Which is new marketing against, you know, versus traditional marketing. Do you think that traditional marketing, you know, when it comes to the traditional media, is it still relevant? Is it still worthy? Is it something that new artists should be still having into account? I mean, still keeping in their plans, or do you think that you should just focus on new media and new ways of marketing?
Definitely important.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you see as new media versus old traditional formats of marketing. I think, you know, taking it back, we spoke about this today, but like the music video still has a huge effect for the success of a song. We saw it with one of our clients who produced and wrote Rush for Troye Sivan. That video was so incredible. It got shared so much that, you know, people started taking clips from it, sharing it on TikTok. So it had this moment where you took a traditional form of marketing and then brought it into an era of TikTok and people wanting to, you know, watch the choreography in it and you know, all of that. And I think marketing can be so many different things. It can be a tour. It can be, you know, what we're seeing with Charlie and Troye right now. They are supporting one another and sort of building each other up. You see it with the Taylor Swift tour right now, where she brought Sabrina Carpenter on. You know, you see it with Olivia Rodrigo bringing Chappell Roan on. Like, that is a traditional form of marketing, is to have a bigger artist then support maybe the younger artists. And you see it with management companies. When SB Projects was at their height, you know, Justin Bieber was, for lack of a better term, the cash cow. He's what kept the lights on. And guess what? He also supported every single artist that was signed to that management company from there. So, you know, whether it was the fact that him and Ed Sheeran had a really great relationship, and then Ed brought on a band called Rixton to open up for them on the tour. And you start to see the puzzle pieces come into place. So I think you can marry the two bits of traditional marketing and new age marketing, and they still play significant roles.
Yeah, I think you can't disregard the importance of, more traditional forms of marketing. You know, they're obviously, you know, there because they're a successful way of marketing artists, right? But yeah, you know, we spoke on this earlier, but yeah, I think a mix of the two, of course. It's more, you just got to use everything you possibly can, you know, with regards to your artillery, as, you know, using every kind of trick in the book, you know, whether that is, you know, focusing time on live, you know, making sure your songs are getting plugged on the radio, more traditional forms of marketing, like Kelly's just touched on, with music videos, TikTok, syncs. What else is there?
Advertising.
Out-of-home advertising.
You can see a song start to escalate in streams or radio play because it was synced in a national ad campaign for something that's maybe played on the radio in between every song on the commercials, or it's played on TV where you just can't get it out of your head and then people start requesting it and that kind of thing.
I think the kind of where the premise of your question comes, though, is probably due to the fact that, you know, it is so tempting to just focus on TikTok, because you can have a viral moment that can literally change everything, like within, you know, seconds. But you can't.
Instant gratification, though.
You can't solely, you know, just utilize and focus your time on that. I think it's important to cover all the bases you and your team possibly can do, right? I think you just got to try it all and see what works for you too.
I think it also relates to the timing of it all too. It's sort of like a relationship. You want the slow burn. You don't want the quick and fast, because look how quickly the quick and fast goes. But if you have the slow burn, you build up foundation brick by brick by brick, and then
their mental health is intact.
There you go.
That's definitely more of a sustainable approach. I think any A&R record label would tell you that they'd probably rather have an artist, you know, success trajectory, you know, go across a kind of slow momentum, slow build, you know, rather than overnight success, because all of a sudden the pressure's on.
I'd also rather have an artist who can sell 3,000 tickets, and I'd rather have my writers and producers work with an artist who can sell 3,000 tickets pretty consistently across a Euro market, a UK market, a US market, rather than just getting 300,000 views on every TikTok. I'm sorry, but that we've just seen, it just does not convert, and that's not how you capture a fan.
Well, that's
how you capture a casual listener.
Yeah, and that's where artists are making most of their money these days is touring, right? And what comes with it, and that's merch. It's selling merchandise and it's selling tickets. You know, that's where artists are making most of their pay.
So one other thing that I wanted to ask you guys is about touring. You know, do you think that marketing and touring should be, you know, hand in hand, working together, you know, when it comes to concerts, and how often, you know, artists just go on tour? Or do you have a...
Well, it's expensive for one.
Yes, it's very expensive. Are you talking about like marketing within the touring space? Yeah, I think that's vastly important. I mean, if you look at Sabrina's tour, for example, when she would perform Nonsense, every show would have a different outro based off of where she was. So it kind of became this insatiable thing where fans wanted to go and
to multiple shows.
And just see what was going to be the outro that day, what was going to be the thing. And you see it with like surprise guests, you see it with Taylor. Like,
isn't every one of her shows different?
What's that?
Isn't every one of her shows different, or is that different parts of her tour?
Yeah, she'll have surprise songs that come in. So
you had Taylor fans, you know, buying. I mean, how much were the tickets? You know, buying multiple tickets to multiple shows, you know, up and down the UK.
Thousands of dollars.
Which is ridiculous. So I guess that is marketing within your own touring.
And you can use those moments and you can capture them, put them on socials, make them go viral. And then what social media does is create this sense of FOMO. You are like, oh, I have to be at that show because you want to talk to your friends about it. It's natural human connection and belonging.
You didn't even know what happened here with the Shakira concert in Colombia, because it sold out.
What happened?
It sold out so quickly. Everybody was like, super pissed, because like even through the different phases that you had, like the pre-sale, the normal sale, the after sale, people were get really upset, and the concert hasn't even happened just yet. So.
Well, that's like Oasis in the UK.
Yeah.
Same thing happened there.
that's a whole other issue with dynamic pricing and, changing and
Ticketmaster being a monopoly.
and increasing, the cost of tickets
We
throughout
weren't
the
even
sale.
dealing with dynamic prices. It's just the fact that people weren't able to get tickets, and people, just were like, "What's happening? How
Same
come
with the
users
Oasis.
have it?"
Was that more to do with like the systems that were in place, like selling the tickets, or like
mean-
kind of digitally, or was it more just like people
No.
just bought them like that?
No, yeah, they were, they were sold right away. So
How many shows was it?
I think she's having 5 shows here, but initially were
So
only
she bet
3.
double it.
No, it was like only 3. One in Barranquilla, one in Medellin, one in Bogotá. Now she's doing 2 in Barranquilla, the best city ever. Then she's doing 1 in Medellin, and I think it's 2 in Bogotá as well. So, and now she just added like an additional date on the Mexico City. So she's doing 6 in Mexico City.
All sold out.
Yeah, all sold out.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of, I will also say with how concerts are going nowadays as well, we did see a huge lapse in, obviously in COVID, with nobody being able to go to shows, and them wanting to have that connection with other people and listening to music. And it's a huge part of like connectivity within music, is being at a live show and experiencing it with other people. So it made people just go feral for tickets when their favorite artist was performing, because God forbid, we don't know if another COVID's going to happen. And what if you don't get to see your favorite artist perform after that? Or what if they got dropped and then they don't have the tour support and then you can't go see them? So it did kind of create this like, oh, I need to get tickets.
Guys, thank
If
you so
anyone
much.
has any questions,
Thank
feel
you,
free to come up to
guys.
me and Kelly on the side as well. Thanks
Thanks
so much.
for sticking around.